So we are headed out to downtown New Braunfels. I don't know the last time I said we're going out on a Saturday night.
140. We just got in the truck.
The truck says it's 140 degrees. I just burnt my arm on the seatbelt. I don't know how people live in Texas in the summer, to be perfectly honest. It's really hot. No makeup, no hair, because the moment you walk outside, it's all gone. We're going on a walking ghost tour.
I've wanted to do one of those for a long time.
Yeah. I've wanted to do one since I went to college in Charleston, South Carolina. Never did one there. So this will be a first for both of us.
Yeah. I always thought New Orleans would be a good one to go first.
Oh yeah, that would have been fun too.
At any time, but
we never did get to do one when we were there.
It's gonna be good, I think.
It's Nagellan's Bakery, the oldest bakery in Texas since 1868. This is where we're starting our ghost tour. Lots of cookies in there. I wonder if they do gluten-free. You think they do gluten-free?
What killed them all, right?
Now it's the Prince Psalms Hotel. But it opened in 1898 as the Comal Hotel. The Egling family was the owners of the hotel. Emily Egling was the matriarch of the family, and she ran the property. Now, Emily was from Galveston. In the early 1900s, this was the party hotel. So if you had a birthday or an anniversary or something to celebrate, this is where you would come to it. And that's the case with our very first spirit. Her name is Penelope, and she came here to get married at the hotel. Unfortunately, on the day of the wedding, the groom had yet to appear. And it's not like these days where you just hop on the phone, text them, you know, see where they are. Just kind of had to sit around and wait for him. So they waited several days, still no sign. Finally, the family said, "Hey girl, I hate to tell you, but we think you've been stood up." Penelope refused to believe that that was the truth. So she sent her family home, and she stayed here at the hotel to wait for them. She actually stayed here for several days, which then turned into several weeks. And eventually, Emily Egling felt so bad for her that she gave her a job here as a maid at the hotel. Penelope ended up working as a maid until Emily Egling passed away, and then she took over managing the property, and she did that until the day she died as well. So it was customary in those days to live on the property that you were running. So Penelope did live here on this property. She was up on the second floor. Those two windows on the far left-hand side of the balcony was the room that she stayed in. It didn't take long after she passed away in the early 1920s. The new manager had taken over, and he had the very first sighting of Penelope that we know of anyways, written down. He said he was in the parlor one day, and a young man rode up on horseback and tied his horse to the railing out front, ran up the front steps, flung the doors wide open, and started running up to the top of the staircase that's right behind the doors. And the manager didn't know who this man was, so he kind of followed his path. And he said, "When I looked to the top of the staircase, I recognized who I knew to be a young Penelope in her long white wedding dress. And as the man reached the top of the stairs, he grabbed her and kissed her, and the two of them disappeared together." We have heard multiple stories. In fact, we were just here last weekend talking to one of the bartenders, and he assured us that it's still happening, that it just happened to him recently, that you will hear footsteps running up the staircase at all hours of the night, even if nobody's there, even if the hotel is empty. If you want to get a chance to see Penelope, you can. You're welcome to stay in her room. I won't, but you're welcome to. County clerk here at the courthouse. You can see her term of service was for nearly 2 full decades. Now this is a job you have to get voted into. So to get voted in for 20 years tells you how good she was at it. We've had people on the tour that were friends of hers, colleagues of hers, neighbors of hers, relatives of hers, and they all said the same thing. Basically that Irene liked things done one way, her way. She's kind of bossy, but that's okay. That's how she got things done. In fact, they said the day she lost the vote, she was so upset about having to vacate her office that it took a sheriff and 2 of his deputies to physically remove her from her office, escort her out of the building, put her in her car, and force her to drive away because she didn't want to leave her position here. And right as soon as he sat down, the stack of papers just went and like flew into the air and fluttered down around Mike. And he just grabbed his keys and went, "Good night, Irene." He ran out of the I have another friend who works here that told me why they don't go to the attic by themselves anymore. So she and a coworker went up there one day, and this is a very frequently used space, very active space for all their files and whatnot. She was up there going through the filing cabinet, and the lights turned on. So she called out, "Hey, there's someone in here, can you turn the lights back on?" No response. So she fumbled her way through the dark, made it back downstairs, and when she did, my friend looked at her and said, "What happened to your where I was standing, this was the filing cabinet, there's the door, which way did I go? And she said, I know for sure I walked by the air conditioning unit because I remember like feeling like the cold air hit me as I walked by. Well, the air conditioning unit was on the ceiling, like opposite corner of her. So I said, oh, that's just Irene doing a drive-by. Like, hey lady, that is not where that file goes. Or jail cell, so maybe it's a bigger one. But over the years, the city hall offices have moved to a larger building. So now it's just a bunch of lawyers up on the top floor. And the basement has been many different businesses in the last 20 years or so. For like 4 or 5 years, it was a restaurant called the Liberty Bistro. After that, for a while, it was Trips Comedy Club. And then most recently, up until several years ago, it was Underground Pizza, which I loved. It was amazing. So when the pizza people moved in, we went to go visit with them, and we said, hey, you know, you guys are from out of town, welcome to Braunfels, we're so glad you're here. You're gonna see a lot of us. We're pretty much here every weekend because your building is really haunted. And they were so excited because they love ghosts. So they said, tell us everything you know. What should we look out for? So we told them the stories that we had heard from the previous owners, people who had worked there, people that were patrons, customers, each businesses before. They all had the same stories to share. So we said, look out for the large shadow man that just sort of seems to wander around the basement. When it was the restaurant here, he liked to hang out a lot of times in the kitchen, so the cooks refused to be in the kitchen by themselves. When it was the comedy club, the sound guy back in the sound booth, he said so many times the comedian would get off stage, and I'd be talking to him about his set or whatever, and he'd say, hey, I couldn't see who was in the booth with you, but like, who was that? They were so tall, but I could just like make out their silhouette. And he goes, I never knew who they were looking at because I was always by myself. So we said, just keep an eye out for that guy. And then the second thing is the phantom feet. So to get into the basement, there's a staircase kind of over here on the side of the building. But if you're in the basement, there's windows, so you can see if somebody's coming down the stairs. And they said so many times, you would look out the windows, you would see a pair of legs walking down the staircase, and you would open the door to greet the guest, nobody would be there. So they just started calling them the phantom feet. So we said, we'll give you guys a few months to move in, get comfortable, we'll come back and visit with you. And when we came back, sure enough, they said, oh yes, the shadow man was hanging out in the corner of the bar.
Are you scared yet?
I'm not scared, but I'm loving the stories.
On top of the original church, kind of like an outer shell. And then once the outer shell was complete, they took apart the little church on the inside and walked the wooden planks out the front door one by one and sold them off in the parking lot. Pretty cool, right? We didn't even know that the church was haunted when we first started giving tours. We were a few months in, and I was telling the other story on the property. We were about to leave, and the gentleman on the tour was like, wait, tell us about the church. I didn't have anything about the church, but he sure did. So he told us his story, which we have heard repeated to us a few times from different people. Very, very similar experiences. So this gentleman is a doctor here in town, and several years ago he was working in the emergency room. There was a family from out of town. They'd been on the river for the day, and their youngest son had had a drowning accident, and he was on life support in the hospital. They were trying to make a decision what they were going to do for him. And so the mother was very upset. She said at the nurse's station, she was like, is there somewhere I can go to pray? And they said, yes, the Catholic Church is right down the road. They have a 24-hour prayer room. Anybody can go anytime. So she came on down to the church, and I don't know if you guys can see, but off to the left-hand side over here, there's 3 stained glass windows. That's the prayer room. She was in there for about an hour and a half or so, came out to get into her car, and the priest came running out. And he said, I'm so sorry, the alarm didn't go off in my office to let me know somebody had come in. How can I help you? What can I do for you? And she said, oh, that's very sweet of you, but I spoke with your Monsignor, and we read scripture together, and we prayed together, and I really feel at peace with the decision I have to make with my family, but thank you. And he said, oh, well, I'm on post tonight. I didn't realize anyone else was here. Who did you talk to? And so she gave a description. They went into the prayer room, looked around, nobody else was there. Well, they have, in their hallway, they have pictures of all the clergy that has ever worked here since the time the church was born. And so he pulled her out of the hallway and he said, do you recognize who it was that you spoke with? And it didn't take her very long. She pointed to a picture of this gentleman. This is Father Bealey. And she was like, oh my gosh, yes, this is exactly who I talked to. He was so kind, so wonderful, like great guy, right? And of course, you know the punchline. The priest was like, well, it couldn't have been him because he's dead, all right? But she said as she was sharing this story back at the nurse's station, that as soon as he said that, she realized that the conversation she had had with this man was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. She said, As soon as he sat down next to her, she was just overcome with comfort. All of her fear, her anxiety, all of her worries just sort of went away. She knew she was just being wrapped in this like blanket of love and peace and comfort. She said it was the most amazing experience. Everyone should get to experience that, because that is not a ghost. That is an angel. Because his spirit is one of the reasons that this is always making the list of one of the top 10 most haunted hotels in the state of Texas every single year. So we're going to get to see Walter. He does like to hang out in the lobby from time to time. He has been known to open the door and greet the guests. The people that work here have told us that a lot of times you'll get cold spots in the ballroom and the lights will flicker just in like wherever the cold spot is. It's kind of strange. He has been on our tour. The second reason, this was the only hotel in town that had private bathrooms for every bedroom. So no community bathrooms here. Very fancy, right? That would sell me right away. But the main reason this place survived is because of this guy right here. This is the Walter Faust. He was the designer, the builder, the manager of the hotel, you name it, this was his baby. Walter did have one small problem. Before he was able to build the hotel, his dad's house actually sat on this property. Well, you can't just like kick your dad out of his house and tear it down and make him homeless. That's not very cool, right? So instead what he did was he put his dad's house, he picked it up, he put it on wheels, and he wheeled it across the street. And it sits right there. I don't know if you can see it. You see the turrets coming out of the trees in the corner, the White House? Over there on that corner. Of course, in those days, the streets were not paved, they were made of dirt. And there just happened to be a giant rainstorm as they were taking the house across the street. The house ended up getting stuck in the mud for about a week before they were able to take it out, wheel it the rest of the way over there, and drop it where it still stands today. It is for sale, so if you guys...
Okay, well, did you see any ghosts?
I think so.
You think so?
Maybe.
Maybe, okay.
Maybe not. We gotta check the pictures.
I maybe or may not also saw a ghost.
Okay, we're home. Back at the camper. Let's go get the puppies. Whoa! You're supposed to wait. You're supposed to wait. I can't even see you. It's too dark. It's too dark. You're supposed to wait. Hey, buddy. Hi, let me see your face. Oh my goodness. Oh, ow. Oh. My knee just hit her in the chest. She just ran at me. What is it? What is it? Hi. You need a leash. You need a leash. I think they're happy to see us. What are you doing? You look at my toes? What are you doing? Silly babies.